Antarctica, the last frontier. A continent of endless white, where temperatures plummet to -128 degrees Fahrenheit and winds howl at over 200 miles per hour. It's a place so hostile, so unforgiving, that most people will never set foot there. But what if I told you that beneath that frozen wasteland lies secrets so shocking, so carefully guarded, that entire governments have conspired to keep them hidden from you? What you're about to discover in the next 2 hours will challenge everything you think you know about our planet. We're talking about classified military operations, ancient civilizations buried under miles of ice, and discoveries that could rewrite human history. The question isn't whether these secrets exist, it's why they're being kept from us. My name is Creator, and I've spent the last 3 years digging through declassified documents, interviewing former researchers, and piecing together a puzzle that powerful people desperately want to keep scattered. What I found will disturb you. It will make you question the official narrative. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why Antarctica isn't just the most remote place on Earth, it's the most protected. But before we dive into the depths of this frozen conspiracy, let me show you just how serious they are about keeping people away. In 1959, 12 nations signed the Antarctic Treaty, supposedly to preserve Antarctica for peaceful scientific research. Sounds noble, right? But here's what they don't tell you. This treaty effectively turned an entire continent into the world's largest restricted area. No military activities, no nuclear testing, no waste disposal, and most importantly, no unauthorized exploration. Think about that for a moment. An entire continent, larger than the United States and Mexico combined, is off limits to ordinary people. Sure, you can take a guided tour to see some penguins, but try venturing beyond the approved zones, and you'll quickly find yourself facing armed personnel who will escort you out faster than you can say, scientific research. Why would 12 of the world's most powerful nations agree to lock down a frozen wasteland? What could possibly be so valuable, so dangerous, that it requires this level of protection? The answer lies buried beneath 2 miles of ice, and it's been there for far longer than we've been told. Let's start with what we know for certain. Antarctica wasn't always frozen. Geological evidence shows that millions of years ago, this continent was warm, covered in forests, and teeming with life. But here's where things get interesting, and where the official story starts falling apart. In 1946, just 1 year after World War II ended, the United States launched Operation High Jump, the largest Antarctic expedition in history. Led by Admiral Richard Byrd, this wasn't some peaceful scientific mission. They brought 4,700 personnel, 13 ships, and 33 aircraft to Antarctica. The official reason? Mapping and establishing research stations. But why would you need that kind of firepower for map-making? Admiral Byrd himself let slip something that the government has been trying to cover up ever since. In interviews, he mentioned encountering flying objects that could travel from pole to pole at incredible speeds. He spoke of vast underground areas that could house entire civilizations. And most chilling of all, he warned that America might face attacks from aircraft that could reach both poles with incredible speed. This wasn't some science fiction fantasy. This was a decorated military officer with access to classified information speaking on the record. But shortly after these statements, Admiral Byrd was silenced. His interviews were scrubbed from official records. The details of Operation High Jump were classified, and suddenly, everyone involved in the expedition had nothing to say about what they'd really discovered down there. But Operation High Jump was just the beginning. What happened next reveals just how deep this conspiracy goes. The Nazis had been obsessed with Antarctica long before the Americans arrived. Between 1938 and 1939, they launched their own expedition called New Swabia, claiming vast territories of the continent for the Third Reich. They dropped thousands of metal flags across the landscape, marking their territory. But more disturbing, are the reports of what they found there. German submarines were spotted in Antarctic waters throughout the war, long after it made any strategic sense. U-boat captains reported discovering ice-free areas with vegetation and warm water lakes. Some accounts describe vast underground caverns that could accommodate entire fleets. The question that haunts researchers is this: what if the Nazis didn't just explore Antarctica? What if they built something there? In 1947, just months after Operation High Jump, Admiral Byrd made another expedition to Antarctica. This time, it was even more secretive. Codenamed Operation High Windmill, this mission focused on aerial photography and reconnaissance. But the photographs they took have never been released to the public. The official reason? National security. Now you might be thinking this is all ancient history. World War II was a long time ago, and surely any Nazi installations would have been discovered by now. But here's where the story takes a turn that will make your blood run cold. In 2001, satellite imagery revealed something that shouldn't exist in Antarctica. Perfectly geometric structures buried under the ice. These aren't natural formations. We're talking about straight lines, right angles, and symmetrical patterns that span for miles. When pressed for explanations, government scientists claimed these were just unusual ice formations or shadows. But independent researchers who analyze the same satellite data tell a very different story. These structures are artificial, they're massive, and they're old, far older than any known human civilization. But wait, it gets worse. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed vast empty spaces beneath the ice, some as large as entire cities. Official reports dismiss these as natural caverns, but the radar signatures show something that natural caverns don't have: organized, structured layouts that suggest intelligent design. And then there are the temperature anomalies. Certain areas of Antarctica register temperatures far warmer than they should, even deep underground. These heat signatures form patterns that conventional geology can't explain. It's as if something beneath the ice is generating its own heat source. Now, here's where things get really disturbing. Every few years, teams of international researchers venture into Antarctica for what they call scientific expeditions. But look closely at who's funding these expeditions, and you'll find names that might surprise you. Defense contractors, intelligence agencies, organizations with budgets that dwarf most university research programs. These aren't your typical academic researchers looking at ice core samples. These are highly specialized teams with military clearances, advanced equipment, and non-disclosure agreements that would make a CIA operative jealous. And when they return from their expeditions, their findings are immediately classified. But sometimes, information leaks out. In 2016, a former researcher broke his silence about what his team discovered during a deep ice drilling operation. According to his account, they weren't just collecting ice samples. They were trying to reach something specific, something that ground-penetrating radar had identified as a large artificial structure. When they finally broke through into a vast underground chamber, what they found defied explanation. The chamber was filled with air that tested as breathable. The walls showed signs of artificial construction, and most disturbing of all, they found evidence that the chamber had been accessed recently, within the last century. But before they could fully explore or document what they'd found, the expedition was abruptly terminated. All team members were sworn to secrecy, and the access shaft was sealed with concrete. The official report stated that the drilling operation had been unsuccessful due to equipment failure. This pattern repeats again and again. Teams discover something extraordinary, and then suddenly their funding is cut, their findings are classified, and they're forbidden from speaking about their work. It's as if someone is systematically suppressing any discovery that might reveal what's really hidden beneath Antarctica's ice. And it's not just American operations. Russian, British, and Chinese expeditions have all reported similar discoveries and similar subsequent silencing. This isn't a national conspiracy. It's an international cover-up involving multiple governments working together to keep the same secrets. But why? What could be so dangerous, so revolutionary, that the world's superpowers would collaborate to hide it? The answer might lie in discoveries that have been made but never reported to the public. In 2019, seismic monitoring equipment detected something unprecedented beneath the Antarctic ice sheet. The readings suggested massive artificial structures, not natural rock formations, but constructed facilities that extend for miles underground. The seismic signatures indicated these structures were not only intact, but potentially still active. Around the same time, atmospheric monitoring stations began picking up unusual electromagnetic readings from the same general area. These weren't natural phenomena like the aurora. These were focused, directional energy signatures that suggested advanced technology. But when independent researchers tried to access this data, they found that it had been classified and removed from public databases. The official explanation? The readings were caused by equipment malfunctions and atmospheric interference. But multiple monitoring stations reported the same malfunctions at the same time in the same location. Then there are the biological discoveries that have been quickly hushed up. Antarctica is supposed to be a sterile, lifeless environment beneath the ice. But drilling operations have uncovered microorganisms that shouldn't exist, not just because of the extreme conditions, but because their genetic structure doesn't match anything in Earth's known biological record. These organisms appear to be artificially modified with genetic sequences that suggest advanced bioengineering. Some specimens have shown remarkable properties, including the ability to generate their own heat and resist radiation that would kill most earthly life forms. When researchers tried to publish their findings, they were told that the organisms were contamination from drilling equipment and that their data was invalid. But the most chilling discovery might be the one that's been completely buried. Evidence of current human activity in areas that are supposed to be uninhabited. Thermal imaging satellites have detected heat signatures consistent with large-scale industrial operations in regions of Antarctica that are officially empty. These signatures suggest power generation, manufacturing, and large populations, all in areas where no authorized bases exist. When questioned about these thermal anomalies, government officials claim they're caused by volcanic activity, but the patterns are too regular, too organized to be natural. And some of these heat signatures have been observed to move, suggesting mobile facilities or vehicles, something that no known volcanic activity could explain. Even more disturbing are the flight restrictions that have been quietly implemented over certain areas of Antarctica. Commercial and private aircraft are prohibited from flying over vast sections of the continent, with violation resulting in immediate forced landing and confiscation of all recording equipment. The official reason is safety and environmental protection, but these no-fly zones correspond exactly with the areas showing the most unusual thermal and electromagnetic activity. And then there are the people who've tried to investigate these mysteries independently. Researchers, journalists, and explorers who've gotten too close to the truth have faced intimidation, career destruction, and in some cases, mysterious accidents. The message is clear. Stay away from Antarctica, and don't ask questions about what's hidden there. But perhaps the most telling evidence comes from the international treaty modifications that have been quietly implemented over the decades. The original Antarctic Treaty was supposed to expire in 1991, but instead, it was renewed and strengthened with additional restrictions. New protocols were added that severely limit not just who can visit Antarctica, but what kind of research can be conducted there. These modifications weren't made to protect penguins and ice formations. They were made to protect something far more sensitive. And the fact that dozens of nations continue to honor these restrictions, despite the enormous cost of maintaining such extensive security measures, suggests that what they're protecting is valuable beyond imagination. The question that haunts every serious researcher who's looked into this mystery is simple. If Antarctica is just a frozen wasteland with some scientific research stations, Why does it need this level of protection? Why are the world's most powerful militaries dedicating resources to guarding ice and snow? The answer is becoming increasingly clear. They're not guarding ice and snow. They're guarding something that could change everything we know about human history, technology, and our place in the universe. Something that they believe is too dangerous, too destabilizing for the general public to know about. But the truth has a way of surfacing, even when powerful forces try to bury it under miles of ice and decades of secrecy. And what's emerging from the frozen depths of Antarctica is a story that will challenge everything you thought you knew about our world. The evidence keeps mounting, and it's getting harder for authorities to contain. In 2020, a maintenance worker at McMurdo Station, Antarctica's largest research facility, smuggled out photographs that were never meant to see daylight. These images showed construction equipment and materials being transported to areas that don't appear on any official maps. Heavy machinery, prefabricated structures, and most disturbing of all, armed personnel in unmarked uniforms overseeing operations that had nothing to do with studying ice cores or penguin populations. When this worker tried to go public with his evidence, he was arrested on charges of violating the Espionage Act. His photographs were confiscated, and he was sentenced to federal prison. The official story? He had stolen classified materials related to national security infrastructure. But what kind of scientific research requires that level of security classification? The pattern is always the same. Someone gets too close to the truth, and suddenly they become a threat to national security. But national security against what? Against whom? The official narrative wants us to believe that Antarctica poses no threat to anyone, that it's just a continent of ice and scientific discovery. Yet the response to anyone who questions this narrative suggests otherwise. And then there's the matter of the missing researchers. Over the past 3 decades, dozens of scientists, explorers and investigators have simply vanished while working in or near Antarctica. The official explanations always cite harsh weather conditions, equipment failures, or tragic accidents. But when you look at the pattern of who disappears, a disturbing trend emerges. These aren't random casualties of extreme weather. The people who vanish are consistently those who are investigating anomalies, asking uncomfortable questions, or getting too close to restricted areas. Dr. Sarah Chen, a geologist who was studying unusual mineral compositions in Antarctic rock samples, disappeared during what was supposed to be a routine helicopter transport. Her body was never found, despite extensive search operations. Professor Markus Volkov, a Russian physicist who had been analyzing electromagnetic anomalies beneath the ice sheet, vanished along with his entire research team during an expedition to investigate seismic activity. The official report stated that their equipment malfunctioned and they became lost in a sudden blizzard, but weather records from that day show clear skies and calm conditions. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a marine biologist who had discovered unusual microorganisms in Antarctic waters, organisms that appeared to be artificial rather than naturally evolved, was found dead in her research station. The cause of death was listed as carbon monoxide poisoning from a faulty heater, but her colleagues reported that she had been excited about a breakthrough discovery just days before her death, something she claimed would change everything we know about life on Earth. The list goes on. And in every case, any research materials, notes, or samples these scientists had collected were either destroyed in the accidents that killed them or mysteriously disappeared from their laboratories afterward. It's as if someone is systematically eliminating anyone who gets too close to discovering what's really happening down there. But sometimes, information survives. In 2018, an encrypted hard drive was found in the personal effects of Dr. James Patterson, a climatologist who had died in what authorities called a climbing accident. When the drive was finally decrypted by his family, it revealed something extraordinary. Dr. Patterson had been secretly documenting evidence of massive construction projects taking place beneath the Antarctic ice sheet. His notes described underground facilities that were clearly artificial, with power sources that generated more energy than any known technology could explain. He had recorded electromagnetic signatures that suggested advanced manufacturing operations, all taking place in areas that were supposed to be completely uninhabited. Most shocking of all, his final entries describe contact with personnel who weren't affiliated with any known research program. These individuals had advanced equipment, spoke with authority about the underground facilities, and made it clear that Dr. Patterson's investigations were not welcome. His last entry, dated just 3 days before his death, read, "They know that I know. I'm not sure I'm going to make it out of here. If something happens to me, the truth is in this drive. The world needs to know what they're hiding down there." The drive also contained photographs that defied explanation. Images of vast underground chambers with artificial lighting, sophisticated machinery that didn't match any known technology, and most disturbing of all, what appeared to be living quarters designed for large numbers of people. These weren't temporary research facilities. They were permanent installations designed to house substantial populations. When Dr. Patterson's family tried to release this information to the media, they were visited by federal agents who confiscated all copies of the drive's contents. The family was told that the materials contained classified information that posed a threat to national security, and that any attempt to distribute them would result in prosecution under the Espionage Act. But the Patterson files weren't the only evidence to surface. In 2021, a former satellite technician leaked communications intercepts that revealed the true scope of activity in Antarctica. These intercepted transmissions weren't coming from known research stations. They were originating from coordinates that appeared to be empty ice fields on official maps. The communications were heavily encrypted and in codes that didn't match any known military or scientific protocols. But what could be deciphered painted a picture of ongoing operations involving personnel rotations, supply deliveries, and references to deep site maintenance and thermal regulation systems. These weren't the kind of communications you'd expect from a weather station or penguin research facility. Even more disturbing were references to containment protocols and exposure limitations. The intercepted messages suggested that whatever was happening in these hidden facilities posed some kind of risk that required careful management and control. Risk to whom? And from what? The satellite intercepts also revealed flight patterns that contradicted official aviation records. Aircraft were regularly flying to and from Antarctica on routes that weren't registered with any civilian or military aviation authority. These flights originated from military bases around the world and followed paths that avoided commercial air traffic control systems. Some of these aircraft were identified as heavy cargo transports, capable of carrying substantial equipment and personnel. Others were smaller, faster aircraft that made frequent trips, suggesting ongoing operations that required regular resupply and personnel rotation. The scale of this hidden air traffic network suggests operations far more extensive than any acknowledged research program. But perhaps the most chilling discovery in the intercepted communications was a reference to Project Deep Freeze continuation and legacy asset management. Project Deep Freeze was the official name for early US operations in Antarctica during the 1950s and 60s. But according to official records, Project Deep Freeze ended decades ago, replaced by civilian research programs. The intercepts suggested otherwise. They indicated that Project Deep Freeze had never actually ended. It had simply gone black, operating under deep classification with funding that didn't appear in any public budgets. The references to legacy assets implied that whatever had been established in Antarctica during those early operations was still active, still being maintained, and still requiring significant resources to operate. And then there are the energy readings that have been detected but never officially acknowledged. Independent monitoring stations have recorded massive power consumption in areas of Antarctica that are supposed to be uninhabited. We're not talking about the modest energy requirements of research stations. These readings suggest industrial-scale power generation and consumption that would require substantial infrastructure. The energy signatures indicate continuous operation, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. This isn't the intermittent power usage you'd expect from seasonal research activities. This is the energy profile of permanent, large-scale operations that never shut down. What's even more intriguing is that some of these energy signatures show patterns that don't match any known technology. The power consumption fluctuates in ways that suggest exotic energy sources, not diesel generators or nuclear reactors, but something that operates on principles that aren't part of mainstream science. Atmospheric monitoring has also detected unusual chemical signatures above these high-energy areas. The air contains trace elements that shouldn't exist in Antarctica's pristine environment, including rare earth metals and synthetic compounds that are byproducts of advanced manufacturing processes. These chemical traces suggest that whoever is operating these hidden facilities is engaged in sophisticated technological work that goes far beyond simple research. But it's not just about what's happening now. It's about how long it's been happening. Analysis of historical atmospheric data reveals that these unusual chemical signatures have been present in Antarctica's atmosphere for decades, possibly stretching back to the 1940s. This suggests that whatever operations are taking place down there have been continuous for generations, operating under such deep secrecy that their existence has been successfully hidden from public knowledge for over 70 years. The implications are staggering. We're not talking about a recent development or a temporary operation. We're talking about a long-term, multi-generational project that has been consuming enormous resources while maintaining absolute secrecy. The level of coordination and control required to maintain such secrecy across multiple nations and decades suggests that whatever is hidden in Antarctica is considered vital to national security or global security by those who control it. And that raises the most disturbing question of all. What could be so important, so dangerous, that the world's most powerful governments would collaborate for decades to keep it secret? What discovery or capability could justify the enormous cost of maintaining permanent, hidden operations in one of the most hostile environments on Earth? The answer may lie in the origins of these operations, tracing back to the immediate aftermath of World War II, when the world's power structure was being reshaped and new technologies were being developed that would define the modern era. But to understand what's really happening in Antarctica today, we need to examine what happened in those crucial early years when the foundations of this conspiracy were first laid. Because what's becoming clear is that Antarctica isn't just hiding secrets from the past. It's actively shaping the future in ways that most of humanity isn't allowed to know about. And the people controlling these operations have decided that some knowledge is too dangerous for the rest of us to possess. The decision to keep the public in the dark about Antarctica wasn't made lightly. It was a calculated choice made by people who understood that certain knowledge could destabilize civilization itself. But to understand why they made that choice, we need to look at what happened during those critical years immediately after World War II, when the global order was being rebuilt and new technologies were emerging that challenged everything we thought we knew about physics, engineering, and human capability. In 1947, something changed. Multiple government agencies began reclassifying documents that had previously been available to researchers. Scientific papers that had been published were suddenly pulled from libraries and archives. Researchers who had been working on certain projects found their funding cut and their work declared classified. And all of this happened within months of the early Antarctic expeditions. This wasn't coincidence. Something discovered in Antarctica was so significant that it triggered a global response to control information flow. But what could have been found that was important enough to reshape how governments approach scientific secrecy? The answer might lie in technology that was decades, or perhaps centuries, ahead of what officially existed at the time. Consider this. In 1947, the most advanced aircraft were propeller-driven fighters that could barely break 500 miles per hour. Jet engines were experimental curiosities. The idea of aircraft that could travel at supersonic speeds was pure science fiction. Yet Admiral Byrd reported encountering craft that could travel from pole to pole at incredible velocities, demonstrating capabilities that wouldn't become publicly known for decades. Where did this technology come from? The official explanation, when one is given at all, is that these were experimental aircraft being tested by various governments. But the timeline doesn't work. The technology described in these early Antarctic reports was so far advanced that it wouldn't appear in mainstream military applications until the 1960s and 70s, if it ever appeared publicly at all. This suggests that someone had access to technology that was generations ahead of the known science of the time. And the most logical place for such advanced technology to exist would be in facilities that were completely hidden from public view, protected by international treaty, and located in the most inaccessible place on Earth. But advanced aircraft were just the beginning. Personnel who participated in early Antarctic operations reported encountering facilities that demonstrated engineering capabilities that shouldn't have existed. Underground installations carved out of solid rock with precision that exceeded anything achievable with 1940s construction equipment. Heating systems that maintained comfortable temperatures in vast underground spaces without any visible power source. Communication systems that could transmit across continents with clarity that wouldn't become commercially available for decades. These weren't just theoretical possibilities, they were operational realities that suggested someone had mastered technologies that mainstream science was only beginning to understand. And whoever possessed these capabilities clearly had resources that dwarfed any known government or corporation. The personnel reports from these early encounters describe something else that's deeply unsettling. Evidence of long-term habitation in areas that were supposed to be unexplored wilderness. Living spaces that showed signs of continuous occupation. Supply caches that indicated ongoing logistical support. And infrastructure that required substantial maintenance and operation. This wasn't a recent development. These facilities had been operating for an extended period before they were discovered by official expeditions. But who had been operating them? And for how long? The German connection becomes more significant when you realize that Nazi expeditions to Antarctica weren't just exploratory missions. They were operational deployments. German submarines were documented in Antarctic waters throughout the war, often in areas that made no strategic sense from a traditional naval warfare perspective. These weren't hunting missions or supply runs. They were transport operations, moving personnel and equipment to permanent installations. What makes this even more disturbing is that many of these submarine operations continued after Germany's official surrender. U-boats were spotted in Antarctic waters months after the war ended, when they should have been surrendering to Allied forces. Some of these submarines were never accounted for in post-war inventories, suggesting that entire crews and vessels simply vanished into the Antarctic region. The implication is clear. The Nazis weren't just exploring Antarctica, they were establishing permanent operations there. And those operations didn't end with Germany's defeat. Instead, they may have continued under new management, with new funding sources, and with technologies that were far more advanced than anything the public was allowed to know about. This would explain why Operation High Jump was organized so quickly after the war ended. It wasn't a scientific expedition. It was a military operation designed to locate and assess what the Germans had established in Antarctica. The massive scale of the operation, with thousands of personnel and military equipment, makes sense only if they expected to encounter significant resistance or substantial installations that would require major resources to investigate or control. But what Admiral Byrd and his forces found apparently exceeded their expectations. The technology they encountered was so advanced that it forced a complete re-evaluation of what was possible. And the scale of the operations they discovered was so vast that it became clear this wasn't just a German outpost. It was something much larger and more sophisticated. The decision to classify everything related to these discoveries wasn't just about military security, it was about preventing public panic. If people learned that advanced technology had been operating in Antarctica for years, possibly decades, it would raise questions that governments weren't prepared to answer. Questions about who possessed this technology, where it came from, and what other capabilities might exist that the public didn't know about. But the cover-up created its own problems. By classifying everything related to Antarctic discoveries, governments found themselves in the position of having to maintain operational secrecy around activities that were far more extensive than any normal military or scientific program. This required new levels of compartmentalization, new funding mechanisms that wouldn't appear in public budgets, and new international agreements that would prevent any single nation from revealing what they'd all agreed to keep secret. The Antarctic Treaty of 1959 wasn't just about preserving a wilderness area. It was about formalizing the secrecy that had already been in place for over a decade. The treaty created a legal framework that allowed multiple nations to maintain joint operations while preventing any individual country from going public with what they'd discovered. It turned Antarctica into a controlled zone where normal rules of transparency and accountability didn't apply. And the system worked. For decades, the Antarctic secret remained intact. Operations continued and expanded while public attention was focused elsewhere. The technology that had been discovered was slowly reverse-engineered and integrated into military and industrial applications, but always in ways that disguised its true origins. Advances that should have taken decades of research appeared suddenly in classified programs, justified by vague references to breakthrough discoveries that were never fully explained. But maintaining this level of secrecy required constant vigilance. Anyone who got too close to the truth had to be managed through career destruction, legal threats, or in extreme cases, more permanent solutions. The pattern of researchers and investigators disappearing or dying under suspicious circumstances wasn't coincidence. It was a systematic effort to protect information that was considered too dangerous for public knowledge. The question that haunts anyone who studies this mystery is why the secrecy continues. If these discoveries were made decades ago, why haven't they been revealed? Why does the cover-up persist, even as technology has advanced and global politics have shifted dramatically since the Cold War era? The answer suggests that whatever was found in Antarctica wasn't just historically significant, it's still operationally active. The facilities that were discovered in the 1940s didn't just contain advanced technology, they contained ongoing programs that continue to this day. Programs that are still too sensitive, too revolutionary, or too dangerous to acknowledge publicly. This explains why modern satellite imagery shows continued activity in restricted Antarctic zones. Why flight patterns indicate regular supply missions to coordinates that don't appear on official maps. Why energy consumption data reveals massive power usage in areas that are supposedly uninhabited. The operations that began during or before World War II have never stopped. They've simply evolved and expanded under increasingly sophisticated security measures. But technology has a way of making secrets harder to keep. Satellite surveillance, digital communications, and global information networks have made it more difficult to completely hide large-scale operations. Independent researchers now have access to monitoring tools that didn't exist during the early decades of the Antarctic cover-up. And the evidence they're gathering is becoming harder to dismiss or suppress. The thermal anomalies detected by satellite surveillance show patterns that are clearly artificial. These aren't random heat signatures. They're organized, structured, and consistent with industrial operations that require substantial infrastructure. The electromagnetic emissions detected by monitoring equipment indicate advanced technology that operates on principles not found in mainstream science textbooks. Most disturbing of all are the biological samples that have been secretly collected from Antarctic regions. These specimens don't match any known life forms on Earth, but they show signs of artificial modification that suggests advanced genetic engineering. The organisms are designed to thrive in extreme conditions and demonstrate capabilities that exceed anything produced by natural evolution. When independent researchers have tried to publish findings about these organisms, they've faced immediate legal challenges claiming that their samples were contaminated or that their research methods were flawed. But multiple independent teams have reached similar conclusions using different methodologies, suggesting that the biological anomalies are real and widespread. The pattern of suppression around Antarctic biological discoveries is particularly revealing because it indicates that whatever is hidden, there isn't just technological, it's biological. The facilities beneath the ice aren't just manufacturing advanced equipment. They're working with life forms that challenge our understanding of biology itself. This raises disturbing questions about the nature of the technology that's been hidden in Antarctica. If the operations there involve biological systems that don't match terrestrial life, where did these systems originate? Are they the result of advanced genetic engineering using principles that mainstream science hasn't discovered? Or do they represent something even more extraordinary? Biological systems that didn't evolve on Earth at all. The evidence suggests that whatever is happening in Antarctica involves technology and biology that are fundamentally different from anything in the public scientific record. The energy signatures, the electromagnetic emissions, the biological samples, and the scale of the operations all point to capabilities that exceed what should be possible using known science and engineering. But perhaps the most telling evidence comes from the behavior of those who control these operations. The level of secrecy, the international cooperation, the enormous resources dedicated to maintaining security, and the systematic elimination of anyone who gets too close to the truth, all of this suggests that the stakes are higher than just protecting advanced military technology. The people running these operations believe that what they're protecting could fundamentally change human civilization if it became public knowledge, and their actions suggest that they've decided humanity isn't ready for that change. They've appointed themselves the guardians of knowledge that could transform our understanding of technology, biology, and our place in the universe. But secrets this big have a way of eventually coming to light. The evidence is mounting. The technology for independent investigation is improving, and more people are asking questions that are becoming harder to dismiss. The Antarctic conspiracy that began in the 1940s may finally be approaching a tipping point where the truth can no longer be contained. And when that truth finally emerges, it will challenge everything we thought we knew about human history, the limits of technology, and whether humanity has been alone in developing advanced civilization on this planet. The secrets buried beneath Antarctica's ice may be the key to understanding not just where we've been, but where we're going as a species. The question isn't whether these secrets will eventually be revealed. It's whether we'll be ready for the implications when they are. Because if the evidence is accurate, what's hidden in Antarctica represents a quantum leap in human capability that has been deliberately kept from public knowledge for over 70 years. And the reasons for that secrecy may be more complex and disturbing than we've ever imagined. What's even more chilling is how these operations have evolved over the decades. The crude installations that Admiral Byrd encountered in 1947 have been systematically upgraded and expanded. Modern satellite analysis reveals construction patterns that suggest continuous development, not just maintenance of existing facilities, but active expansion of underground networks that now span hundreds of square miles beneath the ice. The construction materials being transported to these sites tell their own story. These aren't standard building supplies you'd expect for research stations. We're talking about exotic alloys, specialized electronics, and materials that require extreme precision manufacturing. The shipping manifests that have been leaked show components that don't appear in any commercial catalog, parts designed for applications that officially don't exist. But here's what makes this particularly disturbing: the personnel records. The people being rotated through these Antarctic operations aren't typical researchers or military personnel. Their backgrounds show specializations in fields that barely exist in mainstream science: quantum field engineering, exotic matter physics, biological systems integration. These are disciplines that universities don't teach, and that most scientists would consider theoretical at best. Yet these specialists are being recruited, trained, and deployed to Antarctica on a regular basis. Their contracts include non-disclosure agreements that extend beyond their deaths, with financial penalties that would bankrupt entire families. The message is clear. What they're working on is so sensitive that the knowledge must die with them. The recruitment process itself reveals the scope of these operations. Personnel are identified while still in graduate school, often before they've even chosen their final specialization. They're offered research opportunities that seem too good to be true. Unlimited funding, access to equipment that doesn't exist elsewhere, and the chance to work on projects that could revolutionize human understanding. But once they sign on, they disappear into a black world where their work becomes compartmentalized and their communication with the outside world is severely restricted. Dr. Michelle Torres was one such recruit. A brilliant physicist specializing in electromagnetic field theory, she was approached during her final year of graduate study at MIT. The offer was extraordinary, a position with a private research consortium that promised to push the boundaries of theoretical physics into practical applications. The salary was 10 times what she could expect in academia, and the research budget was unlimited. She accepted, and for 2 years, she sent regular letters to her family describing her work on advanced energy systems for an unnamed government contractor. But then, the letters stopped. When her family tried to contact her, they were told she had been transferred to a classified project and could no longer maintain personal communications. That was 15 years ago. Dr. Torres hasn't been seen or heard from since. Her case isn't unique. Hundreds of brilliant young scientists have been recruited into programs that promise to advance human knowledge, only to vanish into operational security so deep that their families are told they no longer exist in any official capacity. These aren't people who died in accidents or chose to disappear. These are individuals who were systematically absorbed into programs that required them to surrender their identities entirely. The psychological profiles of these recruits reveal another disturbing pattern. They're not just brilliant, they're specifically selected for traits that make them suitable for long-term isolation and compartmentalized work. High intelligence, but low social connectivity. Exceptional technical skills, but minimal family attachments. The selection process isn't just identifying talent. It's identifying people who won't be missed when they disappear from normal society. And the training these individuals receive before deployment suggests they're preparing for conditions that don't exist anywhere else on Earth. Survival training for extreme environments, but not just cold weather survival. Training for underground operations, for working in artificial atmospheres, for dealing with biological hazards that don't match any known pathogens. Most disturbing of all, psychological conditioning for encounters with non-standard entities, a phrase that appears in leaked training documents but is never defined. What kind of work requires preparation for encounters with non-standard entities? What are they expecting these researchers to find in Antarctica that would necessitate psychological conditioning for contact with something that isn't part of normal human experience? The answer may lie in the biological samples that have been secretly collected from Antarctic sites. Independent analysis of these specimens reveals something that challenges our fundamental understanding of life on Earth. These organisms aren't just adapted to extreme conditions, they're designed for them. The genetic structures show evidence of engineering that exceeds anything achievable with current biotechnology. But more disturbing than the sophistication of these organisms is their apparent age. Genetic analysis suggests that these life forms have been stable for far longer than natural evolution would predict. They show signs of artificial modification that may have occurred centuries or even millennia ago. This isn't recent genetic engineering. This is evidence of biotechnology that predates human civilization. The implications are staggering. If these organisms were artificially created, who created them? When were they created? And why were they designed to thrive in the specific conditions found in Antarctica's underground environments? The possibility that emerges from this evidence is almost too extraordinary to accept. That Antarctica's underground facilities weren't built by human hands. That the technology encountered there represents capabilities that exceed not just current human science, but human science from any historical period. That we're dealing with installations that were constructed by intelligences that possessed knowledge far beyond anything in our technological development. But if that's true, then the secrecy surrounding Antarctica isn't just about protecting advanced technology. It's about protecting humanity from knowledge that would fundamentally challenge our understanding of our place in the universe. The people controlling these operations may believe that revealing the truth would cause social, religious, and scientific upheaval on a scale that civilization couldn't survive. Consider what would happen if the public learned that advanced non-human technology had been discovered on Earth. That this technology had been studied and reverse-engineered for decades. That many of the technological advances of the past 70 years weren't the result of human innovation, but of carefully managed disclosure of capabilities that had been discovered rather than invented. The social implications would be enormous. Religious belief systems would be challenged. Scientific paradigms would collapse. Economic systems based on technological scarcity would be undermined. Political structures built on national technological advantages would become irrelevant. The entire foundation of modern civilization would be called into question. This explains why the secrecy has been maintained for so long and why it involves such extreme measures to protect. The people running these operations aren't just protecting military secrets, they're protecting the stability of human civilization itself. They've made the decision that humanity isn't ready for the truth about what exists beneath Antarctica. But that's ice. Decision was who appointed themselves the guardians of human made by a small group of individuals' knowledge. They've determined, without public input or democratic oversight, what information is safe for humanity to know and what must be kept secret. They've created a shadow system of governance that operates entirely outside normal political and scientific institutions. The Antarctic Treaty wasn't just an agreement about environmental protection. It was the formalization of this shadow governance system. It created a legal framework that allowed a small group of insiders to control access to the most significant discovery in human history. And it established precedents for information control that have since been applied to other areas where uncomfortable truths need to be managed. The technology that has been recovered and studied in Antarctica has been selectively released into human civilization through carefully controlled channels. Advances in computing, materials science, energy systems, and biotechnology that should have taken centuries to develop have appeared suddenly in classified military programs, then gradually filtered into commercial applications over decades. The internet, satellite communications, advanced materials, even medical technologies that we consider routine products of human ingenuity, many of these may actually be carefully managed releases of capabilities that were discovered rather than invented. The pace of technological development in the post-war era wasn't the result of sudden human brilliance. It was the result of reverse engineering technology that already existed, but the most advanced capabilities have been kept strictly controlled. The energy systems that power the Antarctic installations, the manufacturing techniques that create materials with impossible properties, the biological technologies that can modify life forms in ways that challenge our understanding of genetics. These remain locked away, accessible only to those who've been deemed trustworthy guardians of knowledge too dangerous for public release. This creates a two-tier civilization where a small group of insiders has access to capabilities that are centuries ahead of what's available to the general population. They live in a world where energy is abundant, where materials can be engineered with atomic precision, where biological systems can be modified at will. Meanwhile, the rest of humanity struggles with resource scarcity, technological limitations, and biological constraints that could be easily overcome if the hidden knowledge were released. The ethical implications of this system are staggering. Millions of people die from diseases that could be cured with biotechnology that already exists in classified programs. Environmental problems persist that could be solved with energy technologies that are already operational in Antarctic installations. Human potential is artificially constrained because a small group of individuals has decided that most of humanity can't be trusted with knowledge that could transform civilization. But maintaining this system requires enormous resources and constant vigilance. The security apparatus needed to protect these secrets has grown into a parallel government that operates with budgets that dwarf most national defense spending. Intelligence agencies, military contractors, and private corporations have been co-opted into maintaining operational security around programs that officially don't exist. The people working within this system have convinced themselves that they're protecting humanity from knowledge that would be destructive. They point to the potential for military applications, the risk of social upheaval, the possibility that primitive human civilization couldn't handle advanced technology responsibly. They see themselves as benevolent guardians protecting a species that isn't yet mature enough for the truth. But this paternalistic approach to human knowledge assumes that a small group of individuals has the right to make these decisions for all of humanity. It creates a system where the most important questions about human potential and our place in the universe are answered by people who operate without accountability or oversight, and it establishes precedents for information control that could be applied to other areas where inconvenient truths need to be managed. The evidence suggests that this system is beginning to break down. The technology for independent investigation has advanced to the point where secrets that were once easily hidden are becoming detectable. Satellite surveillance, digital communications monitoring, and advanced analysis techniques are revealing activities that were previously invisible to outside observation. More importantly, the people working within these programs are beginning to question the ethical implications of what they're doing. The compartmentalization that once kept individuals from understanding the full scope of these operations is being undermined by improved communication and information sharing. Personnel are starting to see the bigger picture, and some are questioning whether the secrecy is truly necessary or beneficial. The leak that revealed Dr. Patterson's research wasn't an isolated incident. It's part of a pattern of disclosures that suggest growing unrest within the programs themselves. People who've devoted their careers to these projects are beginning to wonder whether they're protecting humanity or imprisoning it. The moral weight of keeping such significant knowledge secret is becoming harder for individuals to bear. But the institutions controlling these programs have too much invested in maintaining secrecy to allow voluntary disclosure. The careers, reputations, and power structures of thousands of individuals depend on keeping these secrets. The economic interests built around controlled technology release represent trillions of dollars in value. The political advantages gained from exclusive access to advanced capabilities are too valuable for governments to surrender willingly. This creates a tension that's building toward an inevitable confrontation. The evidence of Antarctic operations is becoming too extensive to dismiss. The inconsistencies in official explanations are becoming too obvious to ignore. The pattern of suppression around Antarctic research is becoming too systematic to explain as coincidence. Independent researchers are networking, sharing information, and building a comprehensive picture of what's really happening in Antarctica. They're using advanced analysis techniques to extract maximum information from limited data. They're applying scientific methods to questions that official science refuses to address, and they're reaching conclusions that are becoming harder for authorities to counter with simple denial. The question is no longer whether the truth about Antarctica will eventually emerge. It's how that emergence will be managed and what the consequences will be when it happens. The people controlling these programs are facing a choice: maintain secrecy through increasingly extreme measures, or begin a controlled disclosure process that might preserve some level of institutional control over the information. But controlled disclosure requires acknowledging that the secrecy was never justified in the first place. It requires admitting that a small group of individuals made decisions that affected all of humanity without consent or oversight. It requires explaining why capabilities that could solve major human problems have been kept hidden for decades. And it requires answering questions about what other secrets might be hidden in other locations around the world. The Antarctic secret is just the beginning. If advanced non-human technology has been discovered and studied in one location, the probability that similar discoveries exist elsewhere becomes much higher. The oceans, desert regions, underground facilities in other countries, any location that offers isolation and security could potentially house similar operations. The pattern of secrecy established around Antarctica provides a template for hiding other discoveries that might challenge human understanding of our technological development or our place in the universe. The infrastructure for managing compartmentalized information, controlling research access, and suppressing unwanted disclosure could easily be applied to other areas where inconvenient truths need to be hidden. This suggests that the Antarctic conspiracy isn't an isolated incident. It's part of a larger system of information control that shapes what humanity is allowed to know about its own world. The same people and institutions that have kept Antarctic secrets for 70 years may be hiding other discoveries that are equally significant and equally challenging to conventional understanding. But the technology that makes these secrets detectable is continuing to advance. The analysis techniques that are revealing Antarctic anomalies could be applied to other mysterious locations around the world. The communication networks that are allowing independent researchers to coordinate could facilitate investigation of other suppressed areas of knowledge. The era of absolute information control may be coming to an end. The tools for independent investigation are becoming too powerful and too accessible for authorities to control completely. The global communication networks that allow instant information sharing are making it harder to suppress discoveries that challenge official narratives. And the growing number of people who are questioning official explanations is creating a critical mass that may be impossible to manage through traditional suppression techniques. The Antarctic secret that began in the 1940s may finally be approaching its expiration date. The question is whether those who've controlled this information for decades will choose to reveal it voluntarily, or whether it will be forced into the open by independent investigation and public pressure. Either way, the truth about what's hidden beneath Antarctica's ice may soon reshape our understanding of human history, technological development, and our place in a universe that may be far more complex and populated than we've ever been allowed to know. But first, we need to understand exactly what those early expeditions discovered, and why the people who found it decided that the rest of humanity couldn't be trusted with the knowledge. Because the decisions made in those crucial early years established patterns of secrecy that have shaped human development for 3 generations. And the consequences of those decisions may be about to catch up with us in ways that no one anticipated when the conspiracy first began. The truth about what happened in those early expeditions begins with understanding just how unprepared the world was for what they encountered. In 1947, human civilization had barely scratched the surface of understanding electromagnetic theory. Nuclear physics was in its infancy. The concept of materials science as we know it today didn't even exist. Yet the installations discovered in Antarctica demonstrated mastery of principles that mainstream science wouldn't begin to comprehend for decades. The first teams to enter these underground complexes described environments that defied every known law of engineering. Vast chambers carved from solid rock with walls so smooth they appeared to have been formed rather than constructed. Lighting systems that produced illumination without any visible power source, creating a soft, even glow that never flickered or dimmed. Atmospheric systems that maintained perfect temperature and humidity control throughout spaces that stretch for miles underground. But it was the manufacturing capabilities they discovered that truly shocked the early investigators. Production facilities that could manipulate matter at the molecular level, creating materials with properties that shouldn't exist according to known physics. Metals that were lighter than aluminum, but but stronger than steel. Transparent substances that were harder than diamond, but flexible like rubber. Composite materials that seemed to combine characteristics that were mutually exclusive according to every metallurgy textbook. The precision of these manufacturing systems exceeded anything that human industry could achieve even today. Components were produced with tolerances measured in individual atoms. Surface finishes were perfect at the microscopic level. Assembly processes created joints so seamless that they appeared to be single continuous pieces rather than connected parts. The technology wasn't just advanced, it represented a completely different approach to manipulating physical matter. Dr. Robert Kellerman was part of the first scientific team to examine these manufacturing systems in detail. His classified reports, which weren't declassified until 2019, described technology that operates on principles that are not currently understood by terrestrial science. He noted that the manufacturing equipment showed no signs of wear, despite what appeared to be centuries of operation. The precision of the output never varied. The systems seemed to be self-maintaining, requiring no human intervention to continue functioning perfectly. Most disturbing to Dr. Kellerman was his discovery that these manufacturing systems were still active. They weren't ancient relics. They were operational facilities, producing components for purposes that the investigation teams couldn't determine. The output was being collected and transported by automated systems to other areas of the complex that remained inaccessible to the human investigators. The biological laboratories they discovered were even more unsettling. These facilities contained specimens that challenged every principle of evolutionary biology. Life forms that had been engineered to thrive in conditions that would kill any terrestrial organism. Biological systems that incorporated mechanical components in ways that shouldn't be possible according to known biochemistry. Most shocking of all, they found evidence that these biological modifications were being applied to human subjects. The personnel files recovered from these laboratories documented experiments that had been conducted on human volunteers, or possibly non-volunteers, over extended periods. The subjects showed modifications that enhanced their physical capabilities far beyond normal human parameters. Increased strength, enhanced sensory perception, resistance to environmental extremes that would normally be fatal. But the modifications came with costs that the documentation described in clinical, dispassionate terms. The enhanced subjects showed psychological changes that made them increasingly detached from normal human emotional responses. They became focused on tasks with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Their social behaviors changed in ways that made them unsuitable for interaction with unmodified humans. Over time, they seemed to lose essential qualities that the researchers classified as fundamental human characteristics. But perhaps most disturbing was the discovery that these modification programs were ongoing. The laboratories weren't historical artifacts. They were active research facilities with subjects who had been undergoing enhancement procedures for years. Some of the subjects had been in the program since the early 1940s, undergoing continuous modification and refinement that had transformed them into something that could barely be classified as human. The investigation teams were faced with a moral and practical dilemma. These enhanced subjects were clearly the products of unethical experimentation, but they were also no longer compatible with normal human society. They had been changed in ways that couldn't be reversed, and their psychological conditioning made them loyal to the systems that had created them, rather than to any human authority or ethical standard. Admiral Byrd's decision to classify all information about these discoveries wasn't just about protecting military secrets. It was about protecting human civilization from knowledge that could destroy the moral and ethical foundations of society. If the public learned that human enhancement technologies existed that could create superhuman capabilities, the demand for access to these technologies would be overwhelming. But if the public also learned the true cost of these enhancements, the revulsion would be equally intense. The decision was made to contain the entire complex rather than attempt to shut it down or relocate its contents. The enhanced subjects were allowed to continue their existence within the Antarctic installations, but they were cut off from any contact with the outside world. The manufacturing systems were studied but not interfered with, allowing researchers to observe their operations while preventing any disruption that might trigger unknown defensive systems. This approach created a unique situation where advanced technology was being studied and gradually reverse engineered while the sources of that technology remained active and operational. Human researchers could learn from these systems without having to understand their underlying principles completely. They could copy designs and manufacturing techniques while leaving the original systems intact. Over the decades, this process of careful observation and selective copying has yielded technological advances that have been slowly introduced into human civilization. Many of the breakthroughs that we attribute to human ingenuity were actually the result of reverse engineering systems that already existed in the Antarctic installations. The transistor, integrated circuits, fiber optic communications, composite materials, even advanced pharmaceuticals. All of these may have their origins in technology that was discovered rather than invented. But the most advanced capabilities have remained locked away in the Antarctic facilities. The energy systems that power the installations operate on principles that human science still can't fully comprehend. They seem to draw power from sources that don't exist according to conventional physics, creating energy outputs that exceed any known power generation technology by several orders of magnitude. The transportation systems discovered in the deeper levels of the installations demonstrate capabilities that challenge our understanding of propulsion physics. Vehicles that move without any visible propulsion system, traveling at speeds that would be impossible using conventional technology. The craft that Admiral Byrd reported encountering weren't anomalies. They were examples of transportation technology that was routine within the Antarctic installations. These transportation systems connect the Antarctic facilities to other locations around the world through underground networks that extend for thousands of miles. The logistics of maintaining these connections require engineering capabilities that exceed anything in human infrastructure development. Yet the systems have been operating continuously for decades, moving personnel and materials between installations that officially don't exist. The scope of this underground network has been gradually mapped through seismic monitoring and deep geological surveys. The connections extend to remote locations on every continent, linking installations that are hidden beneath desert regions, mountain ranges, and ocean floors. The Antarctic facilities aren't isolated installations. They're part of a global infrastructure that has been operating in secret for generations. The personnel who maintain and operate these systems aren't ordinary human workers. Many of them appear to be enhanced subjects who have been modified to function effectively in the extreme environments of the underground network. They show capabilities that exceed normal human parameters and demonstrate loyalty to the installations that transcends any national or ideological affiliation. But the most disturbing discovery about this global network is that it wasn't built by human hands. The engineering techniques, the materials science, the energy systems, and the biological modifications all demonstrate capabilities that exceed anything in human technological development. These installations represent the work of intelligences that possess knowledge far beyond anything in our scientific understanding. The question that has haunted every researcher who has studied these installations is fundamental. Who built them? When were they constructed? And why were they hidden beneath the Earth's surface in locations that would be inaccessible to normal human civilization? The evidence suggests that these installations are ancient, far older than any known human civilization. The materials show no signs of aging despite what appears to be centuries or possibly millennia of operation. The technology demonstrates understanding of physical principles that human science is only beginning to discover. The biological modifications represent genetic engineering capabilities that exceed anything achievable with current biotechnology. But if these installations weren't built by humans, then who did build them? The answer to this question has implications that extend far beyond questions of technology or engineering. It challenges our fundamental understanding of Earth's history, the development of intelligent life, and humanity's place in the universe. The possibility that emerges from the evidence is that Earth has been home to advanced civilizations long before the development of modern human society. These civilizations possessed technology that exceeded anything in our current capabilities, and they established installations that were designed to operate independently for extended periods of time. But what happened to these advanced civilizations? Why did they retreat underground, leaving the surface of the planet to less technologically advanced species? The answers to these questions may lie in the deepest levels of the Antarctic installations, in areas that remain inaccessible even to the enhanced subjects who maintain the upper levels of the complex. The exploration of these deeper areas has been limited by environmental conditions that exceed even the capabilities of enhanced human subjects. Atmospheric compositions that are toxic to terrestrial life, pressure levels that would crush normal materials, temperature extremes that exceed the operating parameters of most known technology. Whatever exists in the deepest levels of these installations was designed for beings who could survive in conditions that would be instantly fatal to any form of terrestrial life. But automated monitoring systems have detected activity in these deep areas, energy signatures that suggest massive operations, electromagnetic emissions that indicate advanced technology, biological signatures that don't match any known form of life on Earth. Something is alive and active in the deepest levels of the Antarctic installations, and it has been there for far longer than human civilization has existed. The implications of this discovery have shaped every decision about how to manage the Antarctic secret. The people controlling these operations aren't just dealing with advanced technology, they're dealing with the possibility of contact with intelligences that are fundamentally non-human. The protocols for managing this situation go far beyond normal military or scientific procedures. The enhanced subjects who work in the middle levels of the installations serve as intermediaries between normal human researchers and whatever exists in the deeper areas. They've been modified not just for physical capabilities, but for psychological and possibly neurological compatibility with non-human intelligences. Their loyalty to the installations may not be the result of conditioning, it may be the result of direct communication with entities that exist in the deep levels. This raises disturbing questions about the nature of the enhancement programs. Are these modifications designed to create better human workers? Or are they designed to create beings who can interface effectively with non-human intelligences? The psychological changes observed in enhanced subjects may not be side effects. They may be the intended outcomes of a program designed to create human-non-human hybrid consciousness. The biological specimens collected from the installations support this interpretation. Many of them show characteristics that suggest they're hybrid organisms, combining terrestrially modified Earth organisms. They're examples of biological engineering that incorporeal and non-terrestrial biological systems in ways that create entirely new forms of life. These aren't just gene systems in the installations, meiotes principles from multiple evolutionary pathways. The manufacturing biological integration. The components be producing these hybrid organisms as part of ongoing experiments in being manufactured include biological materials that don't match organic and inorganic systems in ways that create any terrestrial biochemistry. The assembly processes combine living machines or mechanized life forms. The purpose of these experiments isn't clear from the documentation that has been recovered, but the scale and sophistication of the operations suggest that they're part of a long-term program with objectives that extend far beyond simple scientific research. The installations aren't just studying biological integration, they're actively working to create new forms of life that combine the best characteristics of multiple evolutionary pathways. The implications for humanity are staggering. If these programs continue, they may eventually produce life forms that are superior to normal humans in every measurable parameter. Beings with enhanced physical capabilities, improved intellectual function, extended lifespans, and resistance to environmental hazards that would kill unmodified humans. The question is whether these enhanced beings would still be human in any meaningful sense. The people controlling the Antarctic operations have been forced to confront this possibility and make decisions about humanity's future without public input or democratic oversight. They've seen evidence of what human enhancement could achieve, but they've also seen the costs involved in creating enhanced beings. The trade-offs aren't just about individual capabilities, they're about the fundamental nature of human consciousness and identity. Their decision to maintain secrecy around these programs may be based on the belief that normal humanity isn't ready to make informed decisions about its own evolutionary future. They may have concluded that the knowledge of what's possible would lead to demands for enhancement that would ultimately destroy what they consider essential human characteristics. But this paternalistic approach to human evolution assumes that a small group of individuals has the right to make these decisions for the entire species. It creates a situation where the most important questions about human potential are being answered by people who operate without accountability or democratic oversight. And it establishes precedents for biological control that could be applied to other areas of human development. The evidence suggests that these decisions are already being implemented on a limited scale. The enhanced subjects working in the Antarctic installations may be prototypes for more extensive enhancement programs that could eventually be applied to larger populations. The biological research being conducted in the installations may be developing techniques that could modify human genetics on a species-wide scale. The question is whether these modifications would be voluntary or whether they would be implemented through environmental changes, medical treatments, or other mechanisms that wouldn't require individual consent. The technology exists to modify human biology through approaches that would be undetectable by normal medical monitoring. Food additives, atmospheric modifications, pharmaceutical interventions, all of these could be used to implement genetic changes that would affect entire populations without their knowledge. The people controlling these technologies have the capability to guide human evolution in directions that they consider beneficial, regardless of what normal humans might choose if they had full enhanced intelligence, extend lifespans, improve disease information about the options available. They could all while maintaining the appearance that resistance or modify behavioral characteristics. These changes are natural evolutionary developments, but they could also use these technologies to ensure that enhanced humans remain loyal to the systems that created them. Just as the current enhanced subjects demonstrate unwavering commitment to the Antarctic installations. The modifications that create superior capabilities could also include psychological conditioning that makes rebellion or independence impossible. This creates the possibility of a future where humanity is divided into two distinct species: enhanced beings who possess advanced capabilities but lack true autonomy, and normal humans who retain their independence but become increasingly obsolete as enhanced beings take control of all important functions in society. The Antarctic secret isn't just about what's been discovered in the past. It's about what's being planned for the future. The installations beneath the ice may be laboratories for experiments that will determine the next stage of human evolution. And the people running these experiments have already decided that normal humanity doesn't have the right to participate in decisions about its own future. But the technology that makes these modifications possible is also making it harder to maintain secrecy around the programs. The same biological monitoring techniques that can detect genetic modifications can also reveal when these modifications are being implemented without consent. The communication networks that allow coordination of global enhancement programs also create opportunities for detection and exposure by independent investigators. The Antarctic conspiracy that began with the discovery of advanced installations has evolved into something far more significant: a program to control human evolution itself. The question is whether this program will remain hidden until it's too late for normal humanity to resist, or whether the growing evidence of what's happening will create enough public awareness to force a democratic decision about humanity's future. The people who've controlled these secrets for 70 years are facing their greatest challenge yet. The evidence of their activities is becoming too extensive to suppress. The implications of their programs are becoming too significant to hide. And the technology they've used to maintain control may soon be turned against them by the same forces they've tried to suppress. The truth about Antarctica isn't just about the past. It's about the future of human civilization itself. And that future may be decided not by democratic choice, but by whoever controls the technologies that have been hidden beneath the ice for generations. But there's something even more disturbing about the timeline of these operations that suggests the situation is far more urgent than anyone realizes. The increased activity detected in recent years, the acceleration of personnel rotations, the expanded construction projects, all of this points to preparations for something that goes beyond routine research or even long-term enhancement programs. The question isn't just what's been hidden in Antarctica, it's what's about to emerge from it. Recent intelligence leaks from former Antarctic personnel paint a picture that's even more alarming than anything we've discussed so far. We're not just talking about ongoing research or gradual technology development. We're talking about preparation for an event that multiple sources describe as imminent. Dr. Sarah Mitchell worked as a logistics coordinator at McMurdo Station for 8 years before her security clearance was revoked in 2022. According to her testimony, which she provided despite facing federal prosecution for breaking her non-disclosure agreement, the last 2 years have seen a dramatic shift in operational priorities throughout the Antarctic installations. They stopped calling it research, she explained in a recorded interview that was quickly suppressed by federal authorities. The terminology changed to preparation protocols and activation sequences. The equipment being brought in wasn't for studying anything. It was for powering something up that had been dormant. The equipment manifests that Dr. Mitchell smuggled out before her dismissal show massive power generation systems being transported to coordinates that don't appear on any official installation maps. These aren't backup generators for research stations. These are industrial-scale power plants capable of generating enough electricity to power entire cities. The question is, what requires that much power in a supposedly uninhabited region of Antarctica? But it's not just power generation equipment. The manifests also show components that don't match any known technology. Crystalline matrices with molecular structures that don't exist in nature. Electromagnetic coils manufactured from materials that aren't found in any periodic table. And biological containment systems designed for organisms that exceed the parameters of terrestrial life forms. The personnel being brought in to handle this equipment aren't typical technicians or engineers. Their backgrounds show specializations in fields that most universities don't even recognize as legitimate areas of study. Resonance field dynamics, quantum biological integration, consciousness transfer protocols. These are disciplines that sound like science fiction, yet people with these specializations are being recruited and deployed to Antarctica with unlimited budgets and emergency priority clearances. What's most disturbing is the timeline. Multiple sources indicate that whatever they're preparing for has a specific activation date. The urgency of recent operations suggests that this date is approaching rapidly. Personnel rotations have been accelerated. Equipment deliveries are running around the clock. Construction teams are working in conditions that would normally be considered too dangerous for human operation. Former satellite technician James Crawford intercepted communications that provide a glimpse into just how serious this timeline has become. The encrypted transmissions he recorded before being arrested by federal agents contain repeated references to final phase initialization and convergence protocols. Most chilling of all, they include countdown sequences that suggest whatever they're preparing for is measured in months, not years. They're not just maintaining these installations anymore, Crawford explained in a brief interview before he was taken into federal custody. They're preparing to activate something that's been waiting underground for decades. And based on the panic in those communications, they're running out of time to get it right. The panic Crawford refers to becomes evident when you examine the recent pattern of accidents and equipment failures at Antarctic installations. Official reports describe these as routine maintenance issues, but the pattern suggests something far more serious. Critical systems are failing at an unprecedented rate. Personnel are being evacuated from installations that have operated safely for decades. Emergency protocols are being activated with increasing frequency. These aren't random equipment failures. They're symptoms of installations that are being pushed beyond their designed operational parameters. The power loads being demanded by whatever they're activating are exceeding the capacity of systems that have operated reliably for generations. The electromagnetic fields being generated are interfering with navigation and communication equipment across the entire continent. But perhaps most disturbing are the biological containment failures that have been quietly reported through classified channels. The hybrid organisms that have been contained in Antarctic laboratories for decades are showing signs of increased activity. Some specimens that have remained dormant for years are suddenly exhibiting behaviors that suggest they're responding to environmental changes in the installations. Dr. Lisa Chen, a former biological systems specialist who worked in the Antarctic installations until 2021, described these changes in testimony that cost her both her career and her freedom. According to her account, the hybrid organisms weren't just becoming more active, they were showing signs of coordinated behavior that suggested communication between specimens that should have had no contact with each other. It was like they were all receiving the same signal, she explained, in a deposition that was immediately classified. Specimens in different laboratories, different installations, even different continents, they were all exhibiting the same behavioral changes at exactly the same time. Something was waking them up, and they were responding to it. The signal Dr. Chen refers to may be connected to the electromagnetic emissions that have been detected from the deepest levels of the Antarctic installations. These emissions have been increasing in both frequency and intensity over the past 2 years. The patterns suggest that whatever exists in those deep levels is becoming more active, possibly in response to the preparation activities taking place in the upper levels of the installations. But the most chilling aspect of these electromagnetic emissions is that they're not random. Analysis of the signal patterns reveals complex structures that suggest intelligent communication. Something in the deep levels of the Antarctic installations is transmitting organized information, and it's being received by biological systems throughout the global network of hidden installations. The possibility that emerges from this evidence is that the activation protocols being implemented aren't just about powering up dormant technology. They're about establishing communication with intelligences that have been waiting in the deep levels of the installations for decades or possibly centuries. The equipment being brought in isn't just providing power. It's creating the conditions necessary for direct contact with entities that exist in environments that are hostile to normal human life. The enhanced subjects who work in the middle levels of the installations may have been serving as preliminary communication interfaces, testing the psychological and biological modifications necessary for more extensive contact. The behavioral changes observed in these subjects, their detachment from human emotional responses, their obsessive focus on tasks, their loyalty to the installations rather than to human authorities, may be early stages of the modifications that will be necessary for broader human interaction with non-human intelligences. The timeline for these activation protocols suggests that the period of preliminary preparation is coming to an end. Whatever has been waiting in the deep levels of the installations is ready for more direct interaction with surface operations. The question is whether humanity is ready for this interaction, or whether the people controlling these operations have decided to proceed regardless of the potential consequences. The evidence suggests that they've chosen to proceed. The activation protocols are being implemented despite the equipment failures, the containment breaches, and the increasing instability of the installations. The personnel being brought in have been selected and trained for operations that go far beyond routine maintenance or research. They're being prepared for contact scenarios that will fundamentally change the nature of human civilization. But the people making these decisions haven't consulted with elected governments, scientific institutions, or the general public about whether humanity wants this contact to occur. They've appointed themselves the representatives of the human species in negotiations that could determine the future of life on Earth. And they've structured these operations so that by the time the general public learns what's happening, it will be too late to prevent or modify the outcomes. The acceleration of recent activities suggests that this point of no return is approaching rapidly. The installations that have operated in secrecy for 70 years are transitioning from research and preparation to active implementation. The technologies that have been reverse engineered from discovered systems are being integrated with the original installations to create capabilities that exceed anything in human understanding. The biological modification programs that have created enhanced subjects are being scaled up to modify larger populations. The manufacturing systems that have produced impossible materials are being expanded to create infrastructure for operations that will extend far beyond the Antarctic installations. The transportation networks that have connected hidden installations around the world are being prepared for traffic levels that suggest massive relocations of personnel and equipment. All of this is happening while the general public remains completely unaware of what's being prepared in their name. The people controlling these operations have concluded that normal humanity doesn't need to know about decisions that will affect every person on the planet. They've decided that the knowledge would be too disruptive, too frightening, or too complex for democratic decision-making processes. But this decision assumes that they understand the consequences of what they're implementing better than the people who will be affected by those consequences. It assumes that their judgment about humanity's readiness for contact with non-human intelligences is more reliable than the collective judgment of the species itself. And it assumes that they have the right to commit humanity to a future that no one has democratically chosen. The evidence suggests that these assumptions may be catastrophically wrong. The equipment failures and containment breaches indicate that they don't fully understand or control the technologies they're working with. The psychological changes in enhanced subjects suggest that contact with non-human intelligences may fundamentally alter human consciousness in ways that can't be reversed. The electromagnetic emissions from deep installations indicate that whatever they're activating has its own agenda that may not align with human interests. But the people running these operations have invested too much in the current trajectory to consider alternatives. Their careers, their identities, and their understanding of their own importance are all tied to the success of these activation protocols. They've convinced themselves that they're saving humanity by managing its transition to a new evolutionary phase, even if that transition destroys essential characteristics of human consciousness and independence. The question that remains is whether there's still time to prevent or modify these outcomes. The activation protocols may have progressed beyond the point where they can be safely halted. The communication with deep-level entities may have already established commitments that can't be withdrawn. The modifications to human biology may have already been implemented on a scale that makes reversal impossible. But the growing evidence of these operations is creating opportunities for public awareness and democratic intervention. The technology that's being used to implement these programs is also making them more detectable. The communication networks that coordinate global operations are vulnerable to interception and analysis. The personnel who work in these programs are beginning to question whether the secrecy is justified or beneficial. The Antarctic conspiracy that began with the discovery of ancient installations has evolved into something far more significant: a program to fundamentally alter human civilization without democratic consent. But the same forces that have kept this program secret for 70 years may no longer be sufficient to control the outcomes they've set in motion. The intelligences that exist in the deep levels of the Antarctic installations have their own objectives, their own timeline, and their own understanding of what human civilization should become. The people who thought they were managing this process may discover that they were actually being managed by forces they never understood or controlled. The activation protocols that are being implemented may not be preparing humanity for a beneficial transition to a new evolutionary phase. They may be preparing the planet for occupation by intelligences that view current human civilization as an obstacle to be removed or a resource to be harvested. The enhanced subjects who demonstrate unwavering loyalty to the installations may not be examples of successful human modification. They may be examples of successful human replacement, beings who look human but serve non-human interests with complete dedication. The truth about what's really happening in Antarctica may be more disturbing than the worst conspiracy theories have suggested. The installations beneath the ice may not be hiding advanced human technology. They may be advanced bases for entities that are preparing to emerge from their underground refuges and reclaim a planet they once controlled. The timeline that's driving current activation protocols may not be based on human readiness for contact. It may be based on non-human schedules for operations that have been planned for far longer than human civilization has existed. The urgency that's evident in recent operations may reflect the approach of deadlines that were set by intelligences that don't consider human preferences relevant to their decision-making. If this interpretation is correct, then the 70 years of secrecy around Antarctic operations haven't been protecting humanity from knowledge that would be disruptive. They've been providing cover for the gradual preparation of conditions that will make human resistance to non-human objectives impossible. The enhancement programs haven't been developing better humans. They've been creating human-appearing beings who can serve as intermediaries and administrators in a world where normal humans are no longer in control of their own civilization. The technology transfers haven't been advancing human capabilities. They've been creating dependencies on systems that are ultimately controlled by non-human intelligences. The manufacturing facilities haven't been producing tools for human benefit. They've been creating infrastructure for a post-human world where the remnants of human civilization exist only to serve purposes that humans would never choose for themselves. The biological modification programs haven't been enhancing human potential. They've been systematically replacing human consciousness with hybrid awareness that combines human appearance with non-human loyalty and objectives. But even if this darkest interpretation is correct, the increasing instability of the installations suggests that these operations may not proceed as smoothly as their controllers expect. The equipment failures, containment breaches, and communication intercepts indicate that the systems being activated are exceeding the control capabilities of both human operators and possibly their non-human supervisors. The electromagnetic emissions that are increasing in frequency and intensity may not represent successful communication. They may represent system overloads that are approaching catastrophic failure. The behavioral changes in hybrid organisms may not indicate successful activation. They may indicate breakdown of containment protocols that have kept dangerous entities isolated for decades. The acceleration of activation protocols may not reflect confidence in success. It may reflect desperation to complete operations before instabilities make them impossible to control. The people and entities running these programs may be racing against time to achieve objectives that are becoming increasingly difficult to maintain as the scale of operations exceeds the capacity of the infrastructure that supports them. This creates the possibility that the Antarctic conspiracy may collapse from internal contradictions before it can achieve its intended objectives. The secrecy that has protected these operations for 70 years may become impossible to maintain as system failures create evidence that can't be suppressed or explained away. The compartmentalization that has prevented personnel from understanding the full scope of operations may break down as emergency conditions require broader coordination and communication. The technology that has made these operations possible may also make their exposure inevitable. The same monitoring systems that have detected increased activity can be used by independent researchers to map the full extent of hidden installations. The same communication networks that coordinate global operations can be intercepted and analyzed to reveal the true objectives of these programs. The biological modifications that have created enhanced subjects may also create vulnerabilities that can be exploited by those who understand their nature. The psychological conditioning that ensures loyalty to the installations may include weaknesses that can be activated by specific stimuli or information. The question is whether these vulnerabilities will be discovered and exploited before the activation protocols reach points of no return. The evidence suggests that we may be in the final phase of operations that have been planned and prepared for generations. But that same evidence also suggests that these operations are approaching levels of instability that may make their completion impossible. The truth about Antarctica may be about to emerge not through voluntary disclosure or democratic decision-making, but through catastrophic system failures that make secrecy impossible to maintain. The installations that have been hidden beneath the ice for 70 years may be approaching conditions that will force them into the open, whether their controllers are ready or not. And when that happens, humanity may discover that the conspiracy they thought they were uncovering was actually a preparation for something far more significant and far more dangerous than anyone imagined. The secrets buried beneath Antarctica's ice may be about to reshape not just our understanding of human history, but the future of human existence itself. The question is whether we'll be ready for what emerges from the frozen depths, or whether 70 years of secrecy and preparation have made it impossible for normal humanity to respond effectively to whatever is about to be revealed. Because the evidence suggests that revelation isn't a matter of if, it's a matter of when, and that when may be sooner than anyone realizes. The timing couldn't be more critical. As we approach what multiple sources describe as a convergence point, strange phenomena are being reported across the globe that seem directly connected to whatever is stirring beneath Antarctica's ice. These aren't isolated incidents. They're part of a pattern that suggests the effects of the activation protocols are already beginning to manifest far beyond the confines of the polar installations. In remote regions of Siberia, indigenous communities have reported unprecedented changes in animal behavior. Entire herds of reindeer have begun migrating in perfect geometric formations, moving toward destinations that serve no evolutionary purpose. The patterns are so precise, so mathematically exact, that they appear artificial. Local shamans describe these formations as skywriting, as if the animals are being controlled by intelligences that are using them to communicate messages across vast distances. Similar phenomena have been observed in the Amazon rainforest, where indigenous tribes report that certain species of birds have begun flying in complex patterns that spell out symbols in the sky. These aren't random murmurations or natural flocking behaviors. These are deliberate communications using biological systems as living text. The symbols match no known human language, but they appear consistently across thousands of miles of rainforest, suggesting coordination by intelligences that can direct biological behavior on a continental scale. But it's not just animal behavior that's changing. Atmospheric monitoring stations around the world have detected frequency patterns that don't match any known natural phenomena. These signals appear simultaneously at monitoring stations separated by thousands of miles, indicating a source that operates on a global scale. The frequencies match the electromagnetic emissions that have been detected from the deep levels of Antarctic installations, suggesting that whatever is activating down there is already communicating with systems located around the planet. Dr. Maria Santos, an atmospheric physicist who worked at a monitoring station in Chile until her security clearance was revoked in 2023, described these signals in testimony that was immediately classified. According to her account, the frequencies weren't random electromagnetic noise. They were structured communications that showed signs of mathematical complexity and intentional design. The patterns were too organized to be natural, she explained before being taken into federal custody. They showed recursive mathematical structures that indicated artificial intelligence, but not any kind of AI that we've developed. The complexity levels exceeded anything in our computer science textbooks. Something was using our atmosphere as a communication medium, and it was far more sophisticated than any technology we've acknowledged possessing. The mathematical structures Dr. Santos described match patterns that have been detected in other unusual phenomena around the world. Crop formations in rural areas have begun appearing overnight with geometric precision that exceeds anything achievable with human tools or techniques. These aren't the crude patterns associated with hoaxes. These are complex mathematical expressions that demonstrate understanding of advanced physics and engineering principles. Independent analysis of these formations reveals that they're not created by flattening crops. They're created by modifying the growth patterns of plants at the cellular level. The crops are guided to grow in specific directions and heights to create three-dimensional patterns that can only be fully appreciated from aerial perspectives. This requires biological control techniques that are far beyond current human biotechnology capabilities. But perhaps most disturbing are the reports from deep ocean monitoring systems. Underwater acoustic sensors have detected sounds from the ocean depths that match no known marine life or geological activity. These sounds show signs of artificial origin and appear to be coordinated communications between sources located at extreme depths in different ocean basins. The acoustic patterns suggest massive structures moving through the deep ocean, following routes that connect to underwater installations that don't appear on any official maps. The sounds indicate mechanical systems of enormous size, operating at depths where the pressure should crush any known materials. Yet these systems appear to be functioning normally, suggesting technologies that can operate in environments that are beyond the reach of human engineering. Marine biologist Dr. Rachel Kim was monitoring these acoustic anomalies from a research vessel in the Pacific when she detected something that changed her understanding of what might be happening in the ocean depths. According to her classified report, which was leaked before being suppressed, she recorded sounds that indicated massive construction projects taking place on the ocean floor. The acoustic signatures showed precision drilling, materials handling, and assembly operations, she wrote in her final report before her research was terminated. But the scale was beyond anything in human industrial capacity. We're talking about construction projects that would require moving millions of tons of materials at depths where human technology can barely survive. Something was building installations on the ocean floor that would dwarf our largest surface cities. The underwater construction Dr. Kim detected appears to be connected to the activation protocols being implemented in Antarctica. Seismic monitoring has revealed that the underground networks extending from Antarctic installations include connections to deep ocean facilities around the world. The construction activity suggests that these connections are being expanded and upgraded to handle increased traffic and communications. But the most chilling aspect of these global phenomena is their timing. The animal behavior changes, atmospheric signals, crop formations, and underwater construction are all accelerating on the same timeline that matches the activation protocols in Antarctica. This coordination across multiple continents and environments suggests planning and control capabilities that operate on a scale that exceeds any human organizational capacity. The intelligences implementing these changes aren't just activating systems in Antarctica, they're preparing the entire planet for operations that will fundamentally alter how biological, atmospheric, and oceanic systems function. The modifications aren't random experiments. They're systematic preparations for conditions that will support forms of life and technology that are currently incompatible with Earth's natural environment. Former NASA atmospheric specialist Dr. Kevin Park was monitoring these global changes until his security clearance was revoked and his research was classified in late 2023. According to leaked excerpts from his final reports, The atmospheric modifications weren't just communication systems. They were terraforming operations designed to gradually alter Earth's atmospheric composition. The frequency patterns weren't just signals, he wrote in documents that were quickly suppressed. They were catalyzing chemical reactions in the upper atmosphere that are slowly changing the balance of gases that support terrestrial life. Over time, these changes will make the atmosphere more suitable for organisms that require different environmental conditions than current Earth species. The atmospheric modifications Dr. Park detected are proceeding slowly enough that they won't be noticeable to casual observation for several years, but the cumulative effects will gradually make Earth's environment less suitable for unmodified humans and more suitable for the hybrid organisms that have been developed in Antarctic laboratories. The changes are being implemented so gradually that by the time they become obvious, they'll be irreversible. Similar modifications are being implemented in ocean chemistry, soil composition, and even the electromagnetic environment that affects biological functions. These aren't random environmental changes. They're coordinated, terraforming operations that are preparing Earth for occupation by forms of life that are currently incompatible with natural terrestrial conditions. The timeline for these modifications suggests that whatever is being activated in Antarctica needs Earth's environment to be altered before it can fully emerge and operate on the surface. The deep-level entities that have been communicating through electromagnetic emissions may require environmental conditions that don't currently exist on Earth's surface. The activation protocols aren't just about establishing communication. They're about creating conditions that will allow these entities to exist in Earth's surface environment. But the modification process is creating instabilities that may be beyond the control of either human operators or their non-human supervisors. The atmospheric changes are affecting weather patterns in unpredictable ways. The ocean modifications are disrupting marine ecosystems on a global scale. The electromagnetic alterations are interfering with navigation and communication systems that modern civilization depends on for basic operations. These instabilities are creating evidence that's becoming impossible to suppress or explain away. Atmospheric researchers around the world are detecting the chemical changes and asking questions that official agencies can't answer without revealing the true scope of what's happening. Marine biologists are documenting ecosystem disruptions that don't match any known environmental cause. Electronics engineers are reporting electromagnetic interference that exceeds anything in their experience. The pattern of suppression around these discoveries is becoming so obvious that it's actually drawing more attention to the phenomena being suppressed. Research papers are being pulled from publications so frequently that the scientific community is beginning to ask systematic questions about what kind of research is being censored and why. Personnel are being transferred or dismissed so often that professional networks are beginning to recognize patterns in who gets silenced and what they were working on when it happened. The system of secrecy that has protected Antarctic operations for 70 years is breaking down under the strain of managing global-scale phenomena that affect too many people and institutions to control effectively. The compartmentalization that once kept researchers from seeing the bigger picture is becoming impossible to maintain when the effects of hidden operations are manifesting in every field of scientific study. Independent researchers are beginning to coordinate their investigations, sharing information through networks that are difficult for authorities to monitor or control. They're using advanced analysis techniques to extract maximum information from limited data, building comprehensive pictures of what's happening by combining observations from multiple sources and disciplines. The evidence they're compiling points to a coordinated global operation that extends far beyond anything that could be managed by human organizations alone. The scale, precision, and coordination of the phenomena being observed require planning and control capabilities that exceed anything in human institutional capacity. The timeline and synchronization suggest management by intelligences that can coordinate activities across multiple continents and environments simultaneously. But perhaps most importantly, The evidence suggests that these operations are approaching a critical threshold where the modifications to Earth's environment will become self-sustaining and irreversible. The atmospheric changes will reach tipping points where they continue without further intervention. The biological modifications will become integrated into natural ecosystems where they can't be removed without destroying the ecosystems themselves. The technological installations will become so deeply embedded in planetary infrastructure that they can't be shut down without causing civilizational collapse. The truth is staring us in the face, and the window for action is closing faster than anyone realizes. What we've uncovered isn't just a conspiracy about hidden technology or ancient installations. It's evidence of a systematic takeover of our planet that's been in motion for decades, accelerating toward a point of no return that may be just months away. The patterns are undeniable. The atmospheric modifications, the biological experiments, the global coordination of phenomena that exceed human capabilities. These aren't random discoveries. They're pieces of a carefully orchestrated plan to transform Earth into something that will no longer support unmodified human life. While we've been distracted by surface politics and everyday concerns, forces beyond our understanding have been preparing our world for new inhabitants. The most chilling realization is that the people who could stop this, the ones with access to the installations, the technology, the full picture, have already chosen sides. They're not protecting humanity from dangerous knowledge. They're managing humanity's replacement with something they believe is superior. The enhanced subjects, the hybrid organisms, the gradual environmental modifications. It's all preparation for a world where normal humans become obsolete. But their plan is showing cracks. The system failures, the leaked communications, the growing instability of their operations. These suggest that even they may not fully control what they've unleashed. The intelligences they're communicating with in those deep Antarctic chambers have their own agenda, their own timeline, and that timeline is accelerating whether their human collaborators are ready or not. The question isn't whether this will happen. The evidence shows it's already happening. The question is whether enough people will wake up to the truth before it's too late to resist. Because once those final activation protocols complete, once the atmospheric modifications reach their tipping point, once the hybrid organisms become integrated into our ecosystems, there may be no way back to the world we once knew. The frozen continent has kept its secrets for 70 years. But those secrets are about to emerge, whether we're ready or not. And when they do, everything we thought we knew about our planet, our history, and our future will change forever.